Welcome to the Cowfish Show, an exploration in human evolution, raising consciousness, creating happiness, fulfillment, and love, one soul at a time. I'm Yale Brooks, a newly awakened soul on a mission to help people find their happiness and truth.
And I'm Lindsey Kimura, a happiness explorer, empowering humans in wisdom and understanding. The universe united us to share our passions. Welcome to our show.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the show. I'm Eric.
And I'm Lindsey.
And today we have an exciting show for you guys. Today's show is sponsored by Magnum Watch. Not just any watch. They're a great company. If you know me, I've got serious watch game. And they are just a complete watch. I'm actually rocking the Cupule, which is a 51 millimeter watch that's priced at $29.99. Actually, $299. It'll be a great bargain if it was $29.99. But you get a lot of watch for the money. Go to magnumwatch.com. All of our listeners get a 25% off discount by using the Cowfish 25. And so today we're season 1. This is our first show. Very exciting. Season 1, episode 1. We're jumping right into it. We're talking about why are so many people unhappy? But the good news is we're going to talk about how to make people happy, right?
Yes.
So the quick notes are, the answer is for why are so many people unhappy is really surrounded around the narrative. And I'm going to talk about the narrative. Some people refer to it as society's big dream, but what that is a collective of all the things that society tells us that we should do. Like we should go to school, we should go to college, we should have this particular job. But all of that does is suppresses our authentic self, and that makes us very unhappy. So on the quick notes on that, so the way to become happy simply is to raise your frequency, your level of consciousness, which we're all about, because most people reside in what is known as first level consciousness, which is referred to as the victim level, and it's also connected to the lower self. So, Lindsey, if you want to jump in and talk about some of that stuff, and we'll get right into it.
Yeah, definitely. So just like you said, Eric, we have this idea that happiness is defined in a certain way. Like society says that in order to be happy, you follow this formula. But actually, happiness really is unique to each individual. So happiness, to start off with, I think we have to define what that is for our listeners especially. So happiness is a sense of fulfillment. So wholeness, joy, and a sense of living your purpose. So because we all have a different destiny, a different purpose, a different what reason we're here living in this lifetime, we need to remember that we can't compare ourselves with others. So I think that the way we become happy in a lot of traditions such as yoga and other forms where we're seeking unity is through finding our purpose. And in order to find our purpose, we have to connect. So one, connecting to a higher power, whatever that is for you. It could be God, it could be the creator, it could be spirit, it could be the universe. And then connecting to yourself. So your true self, that's your higher self, your ultimate kind of bliss body. And then I think a very important point is to connect with your ancestry line, so your family and your roots. And if you look at your parents, your grandparents, your family, that can give you a sense of why you're here. But oftentimes a lot of people, including myself for a long time, I've been seeking for a while. I spent 10 years traveling, seeking to find happiness, yet to discover it comes from within. But I think that it definitely starts with going inward, and Eric has a lot to say on that, so I'm excited to hear about that, Eric. And in exploring inward, we don't need to find it in the external. We don't need to get it from our jobs, from people around us, from our communities, but rather we have to discover why we're here, and then that wholeness, that health will come to us.
Exactly. So I have some knowledge to kick to you guys because, as I said, I am recently awakened. Actually, I found inner peace. I'm vibrating on love, which is around 500 conscious level. And in order to do that, there are certain things that you need to know. So the human has three non-negotiable needs. It needs love. The human needs to belong. So you think of like a community, you think of like a tribe, family, and also the soul needs to know that it matters and that it's being seen. So our biggest fear, actually, believe it or not, is not the fear of death. Our biggest fear is actually being seen. So, and that goes back to the narrative. It goes back to our lower self. It goes back to ultimately what is called the ego. So the first level of consciousness has byproducts. It's solely connected to material and the physical realm. So everything that we're looking for is all about material and physical, which can only lead to temporary satisfaction. It doesn't lead to complete joy. So you get confused with the non-negotiable needs of the human. So we need love, but we seek, and when you're first level consciousness, you don't necessarily know this. Your soul is seeking, but your mind is not connected to your soul. So your mind is actually thinking, I'm missing something. And since you're in first level consciousness, you're all about material and physical. So you're like, I need more clothes. I need more money. I need more relationships. I need more, whatever. And this is something that I went through personally because I was successful in the eyes of society. I was multimillionaire and all this other stuff. But at the same time, I had to admit that I was not happy. Each time I set goals, I was motivated. You set these goals and you're like, wow, okay, set the goal. And I literally would cross the finish line and I'd be like, empty. And a lot of people can relate to this. They have this emptiness because when you're at first level consciousness, that's what it can only bring you temporary satisfaction. It can never bring you complete joy. So, because you are vibrating, typically they say that the average human being vibrates around 200 frequency of consciousness. And that is around the courage and desire. But most of us, because we are in the desired, in the rat race, the desired loop is your emotions is craving, your process is enslavement, and your viewpoint is disappointment. So at some point in time, you're always, feeling unfulfilled to a certain extent. So you can have these significant highs, where you've kind of reached your goals and you accomplish your goals, and then all of a sudden you feel this like kind of letdown. It's like, okay, well, what's next? And that's all because of first level consciousness. Three of the biggest byproducts of first level consciousness is anxiety status. This is certain, I guess in today's world, like a lot of people that I talk to, they're looking at someone's Instagram and they're like, oh my God, this person's in the they're in Prague, they're on the beach, I'm here in my cubicle, I'm miserable. Another byproduct is pride seeking, kind of like what I did. There's authentic pride seeking where it's like, okay, I made it in society. I've got my big house. I've got my luxury cars. I buy those things because I want respect and I want dignity. But then you also have the opposite side. You have the hubris pride where the snobbery is like, okay, I've got my Bentley, I've got this. I'm living the life that you could only dream of. But all of those are really centered around material and physical, and it's really the lower self because it's all tied to ego. And when you're tied to your false beliefs and your false limiting beliefs, it really just brings you unfulfillment. So we can talk about how do we move out of that, and you can go jump into that, and then I'll jump into it.
So I like what you said, Eric, about seeking on the material plane, the physical three-dimensional world. And I did that for a little while, but then I actually started seeking to the spiritual plane. Mm-hmm. And then I realized I was missing out on the three-dimensional plane, So there has to be that balance, almost like the hexagram symbol, where it's the upward facing triangle, which is to spirit, and the downward facing triangle, which is to earth, and having that balance. Because certain traditions, when you practice yoga, you're seeking to unite with God or the universal divine. When you do that, it's like the next step, really, I think, is living in a cave or isolation, which I got to that point where I felt that I had this sense of spiritual unity, but then it took me away from the 3D world. So I think we can go either way. We can go too literal, too three-dimensional, or we can go too high in the spiritual realm and totally forget about the fact that we're human. And as humans, we are the intersection between spirit and matter. So we are meant to encompass and to embody both. So let's talk about some tools, because we do understand at times when we're not feeling happy, when we're not feeling creative or living in our purpose or element. And I would say that the first tool to use is to follow your bliss and to step into your power. And what this means is to do things where you feel that ultimate sense of enjoyment, that bliss that you feel when you're a kid. You may be singing, you may be dancing, you may be playing, you may be helping people, but it doesn't have to be one particular thing. We can have many passions, but it's so important that we follow what gives us joy. And by following our nose or our feelings, whatever sensation or emotion that comes to you in, that can lead you on your path, your purpose, your passion. And that's how we cultivate happiness. And I think another good point is balance. So finding balance in all your bodies and all your elemental centers. So in your spiritual body, your mind, your emotions, your actual physical self, because when we're balanced, equal matter, spirit, and in harmony, we're able to be present. And I think presence is another key tool to happiness. So living in the moment, we may hear that a lot from like Eckhart Tolle and
Definitely.
other gurus, philosophers who talk about be in the now. I think that is definitely a powerful statement, to be present. But I think there's more to that. Like we described, there is a future, there is a past, and preparation is important to set yourself up and create the foundation for your stability. And I think that always coming back to that balance is key. Like a little spirit, a little matter, presence, but also preparation.
Yes. I want to go back to some of the things that make us unhappy. And then I'm going to also give some of my tools to lift our consciousness and elevate to get to the happiness part. So in the narrative, there's two things that end up being created, and it's an image that we have that we create for perfection. It's a false image. So we have this image that we feel is what we define as perfection. The other one is, which is the killer, is we have this image of how we are supposed to act in order to be accepted. Now, this is where it gets confusing, because one of our non-negotiable needs is to belong to a tribe, to a family, or whatever. But when we feel it in the first level of consciousness, we actually feel a need to be accepted. We actually close off ourselves. So if you look at trends, a lot of women are doing, facial surgery and all this other stuff to look a certain way. They're actually really suppressing their true identity for this need to be accepted. And we do, Sam Harris talks about we're really expressions and states of self. So I can be completely different up here, and I could have a different persona when I'm with my family. I'd have another persona. So it's all a typical mask, right? And when you're vibrating low, like you're really kind of suppressing yourself. And because our biggest fear is fear of being seen. So we get confused of wanting to be accepted with wanting to belong, where the soul wants to belong. And from a material and physical thing, we want to be accepted. And so we'll do all kinds of different things to compromise our true self. And then in order to do that, we start living our lives for other people. We start living our lives for our parents, our teachers, and all of that really kills the soul. So the further away that we move away from our soul, the more suffering and unhappiness that we will feel. And so it's, if you think of this kind of like burning entity that resides within you, that is the soul. And when you feel like, our feelings are our biggest navigators, but we don't know that, right? So when we feel unhappy, when we feel sad or whatever, that is our soul telling us that we're off course from the life that we're actually supposed to be living. So we have to kind of, tap into that. But once again, when we're at first level consciousness, we have no clue what's going on. We just, we typically associate it with depression. Because of the two images that we can never live up to, we develop a shame, because the whole narrative is based on this whole reward punishment system. So we feel shameful if we don't accomplish certain things, or if we don't do certain things, or we start to blame other people for, once again, it's the first level is all about the victim. So we don't take ownership of what's going on. We either are shameful for where we're at, a state of being, or we're trying to blame someone for our state of being. I want to read something really, really quick, which is Mo Gaudat, who is the ex-chief officer of Google X and is the author of Solve for Happy. He says that the formula for happiness is if life meets or exceeds your expectations, you are happy. And it says if life misses your expectations, you feel unhappy. And I would agree, but I would agree that that is 100% true only in the narrative, where you're all tied to the physical and material thing. Because once again, if you listen to universal laws will say that we're always, every single human will experience a series of problems, initiations, or tests for the purpose of growing the soul or strengthening the light within. And so if you take his formula, then that means at some given point, every single person is going to feel unhappy because they are going to run into a situation where life does not meet their expectations. So you can chime in on that, and then I will go into the tools to make us feel happy.
Yes, and I think that just the idea that we can make really small changes, small shifts, and then making a tiny little shift, like maybe waking up an hour earlier to do a morning routine or taking a walk, very simple things, can totally shift our path, our direction. So it's not like we have to have this massive transformation and think of, if we are in a type of place that doesn't feel happy right now, maybe we know we could be doing better. We know we could be expressing ourselves more and living up to a higher version of ourselves. It doesn't have to be an utter and complete transformation. It can start with really small changes, like practicing yoga or doing an activity that makes you feel good, eating healthier, and taking care of the things that we can control, and just allowing ourselves that freedom without self-judgment, I would say, just the freedom to make small changes.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think when you said judgments, I think the ego brings out the shame, and I think the shame is our biggest killer of happiness. When we start to judge, we judge ourselves, we judge other people. That is the lower self, is the lowest form of vibration. Once again, it kind of fluctuates between courage and fear. And that's the one thing I forgot to bring up. It was the biggest thing is the narrative is all fear-based, and love cannot coexist in fear. And here is the aha moment. So happiness actually equals love. And when you're in the narrative, we're not taught how to love. So, and in fact, the vulnerability is kind of that fork in the road to get to love. And none of us, because we have these images of perfections, we have these images of how we're supposed to be in order to be accepted, we are not able to be vulnerable, because being vulnerable means letting down your guard, being completely authentic, and feeling like, I can be judged, and we fear being judged, right? Because we have the ego. So the biggest takeaway is, first of all, you have to be aware that you're in the narrative, or you're in the rat race. You're in this controlled, conditioned society that is telling you what you should do, and that's never going to lead to complete happiness. There's people that can have a lot of temporary satisfaction, but I guarantee you, all of them, if they have not elevated their consciousness, are feeling some sort of emptiness. They're feeling some sort of questioning, like, what is the meaning of life? How do I become happy? They're questioning something. So, first step is to become aware. Second step is you have to move and find yourself, know thyself. I can't preach that more and more. It's like you really have to just trust yourself, be alone. A lot of people are so afraid of being by themselves, which is, we self-sabotage because we don't spend the time to, work on self-love. So you have to work on self-love and practicing gratitude. For me, that was one of the two things that I lacked when I had everything. It was I wasn't living in gratitude, and for some reason I had this false belief of not feeling worthy because of, growing up with a very strict military father who had me overachieving. But at the same time, when I overachieve, I had this emptiness. And so we have to get rid of the false beliefs. We have to let go of the ego. We really, really, really have to do clearing, which we'll talk about in another episode. But once you clear your past, because all of us have a conscious and a subconscious, and believe it or not, our subconscious is kind of running our lives to a certain extent, especially when it comes to false beliefs and our limiting beliefs. And then once you're able to release those kind of things, we're able to raise an elevation and become more present. We're not necessarily living in the past, and we're not looking forward to the future, so to speak, where we're just kind of not existing.
Yeah. And I would say once you know yourself very well, we always make choices and take actions based on the level of awareness that we're at. So like Eric said, our actions are based on what we're conscious of and our subconscious combined. So I think as we further get to know ourselves, connection can take place simultaneously. And that's, again, the connection to a higher power, the connection to your family, connection with friends, because we can get to know ourselves so well. I've been that type of person that's like the cave monk. But then after a while, after years, you end up wanting connection with other humans. And there's nothing better than connecting with people, with yourself, with your family, with spirit in a way that is authentic to you. But first, before we connect with others on that deeper soul level, we need to know who we are first. Yeah.
So one of the things that tools that I like to give people is the Myers-Briggs test, which is finding your personality traits. If we can put that up on the screen, it's we all have 16. Well, the psychology, they recognize that there's 16 personality types, which basically determines our traits. And if you tap into those, it'll tell you a lot of your strengths and a lot of your weaknesses, and you can own those things. I think that's one of the first movements to moving towards self-love. Once again, we just have to become aware and conscious, and we have to eliminate the ego, which obviously we won't be able to talk about in this episode, but we're at least bringing you, making you conscious that this is something that has to be eliminated in order to move towards the happiness and elevating your consciousness.
Eric, we're both ENFJs, which is pretty cool.
Exactly.
Eric and I took the test, and we're the same type, so we'd love to see what you are. And by taking personality tests, by learning about yourself through different activities, through your relationship to other people or things, that's how you can really start to get to know yourself, because everything in your field is a reflection back to you.
Exactly.
So start with those self-knowledge tools. And I think that pretty much wraps us up, right? For
Our first episode, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for tuning in. We're so excited to be here. Eric, our very first episode.
Yep.
This is exciting. Happy New Year. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you for tuning into the Cowfish Show. Check back for future episodes on raising consciousness, creating happiness, fulfillment, and love.
And remember to find us and like us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at The Cowfish Show.